in general, people who are preparing for UPSC end up seeing revision as a monolith, as if revision is one thing to be done and it is a straight-jacketed formula of reading it again and again and again and doing it again and again and again. And that is not revision, that is repetition. A person who is not revising is not able to clear prelims as well, and a person who has found out that revision works and is still taking revision for granted, that person is finding himself or herself in a difficult position. One of my favorites is the Feynman drill. Now, the Feynman drill is not something that you will generally hear. I found it difficult because I was not able to remember such factual stuff about what reservoir or what national park is there in which state. What Santosh sir started doing is every day in the class he will ask someone to speak about it. And it is also important to understand that what is not to be revised and what is to be left. Most people do treat revision as something that they can do at any point in time. Even if you finish the syllabus thrice, if you have not revised, you are not going to do well in the exam. I can assure you of that. There are parts to revision which needs to be considered. For example, I have introduced, I'm Vishal Patnaik. I have secured All India rank 341 this year, and I have been associated with LevelUp for Anthro preparations as well as my prelims and mains. So the most important part is I am in a better position to speak about revision per se because I have attempted this exam 5 times, and this was my 5th attempt. And the primary lacunas that had appeared through this process of preparation with me, when reflected upon, are primarily associated with revision itself. So what happens is, so first I'll tell you my journey as well a bit, then there'll be a context to why revision is crucial. So what happens is, in general, people who are preparing for UPSC end up seeing revision as a monolith, as if revision is one thing to be done and it is a straight-jacketed formula of reading it again and again and again and doing it again and again and again. And that is not revision, that is repetition. So revision requires you to have first vision, then revision. So the revision in itself is very technical in terms of preparation and is very crucial for a person who is preparing for UPSC specifically, unless you are an individual who has eidetic memory like Sheldon Cooper. So otherwise, revision becomes crucial. And so what had happened is I started preparing, and my first attempt was in 2021 itself. And in that attempt, I could not do well. Of course, I did not even clear my prelims because I'd started preparing 2 months prior to the exam, and somehow I was told by everyone that I should appear for the exam, and I did not have the right guidance. So I'll not take that into consideration. But then the second attempt onwards, I had understood that there were a few things that needed to be done. And I started preparing specifically for prelims with one of my friends who is presently in IB. And we started preparing for prelims, and we used to do these revisions of the compendiums, the monthly compendiums and the annual compendiums of current affairs that used to come from various, of course, institutions and everything, which are available in the open. So we used to revise them, and so I cleared prelims the second attempt itself. I started clearing prelims, and then on I had cleared prelims. So what I saw was that I was clearing prelims. It is great, but again in my 4th attempt, when I was undergoing training in my state services, I had a lot of time crunch, and also my timelines were not coordinating properly with the person who was preparing with me. So I had no one to prepare with. Primarily speaking, I had no one to revise or discuss something with. So this ended up being an issue, and I did not clear prelims that attempt again. Otherwise, my 2nd, 3rd, and 5th attempts have been attempts in which I have cleared. First attempt should be ignored because I was dumb at that point. I did not have the appropriate guidance. I had started appearing for the exam 2 months into preparation. So rejecting that, if we see a person who is not revising is not able to clear prelims as well, and a person who has found out that revision works and is still taking revision to be for granted that person is finding himself or herself in a difficult position. So I am that example, and I do not want other examples to be created. That is the reason why this session is crucial. So we'll start with first of all why revision is necessary. Of course, the most important thing is at that point when you have studied everything almost in your capacity. If you see a question from on the day of prelims or on the day of mains, you will generally find that you have a lot of acquaintance or you have at least heard about it, but you do not know exactly how to pinpoint or how to write about it, and that is where the issue comes out, because everything feels familiar, but we do not find ourselves at the exact position or not being able to pinpoint at the exact answer, which is the requirement of prelims. And in case of mains, not being able to recollect few keywords which are very crucial for that answer. So in case of such issues, it is extremely crucial that we do start preparing for the revision in general. Preparing for revision itself is also crucial because you need to know few aspects of it. We'll start with that first. But in general, what happens is revision is different for various subjects, is different for various parts of the exam, and is also different for every person. So it has three dimension in itself. So mains answer can be written on revision itself in terms of the fact that there are parts which are crucial in terms of you forgetting and you being able to remember. Let's say a person is a BA in history. That person may find himself or herself in a position where they are not they do not find the requirement of revising history too much. They may find themselves in a point where they may need to revise something else much more than another subject. In this case, it is crucial to understand that revision is different for different people, and that is where that comes into action. And under pressure, revision makes you very fluid and very active in terms of answering, because subconscious helps you in terms of answering, and hence the revision is crucial. Now we have to go to the fact that there are certain parts, as I mentioned, that revision is not a monolith. It means that there are parts to revision which needs to be considered. For example, in my case exactly prelims, let's say, so I understood that my recall period was around 7 days for the prelims factual aspects, which means that I had to finish all the parts of the prelims preparation or the prelims syllabus which were crucial for the exam within those 7 days. So I had to consolidate all the material appropriately. I had to make sure that these 7 days were very much dedicated and regimented for me to revise them appropriately. So that is very crucial. So you need to understand that you have a very different recall period, and that may be different from others. Someone may have 15 days of recall period. That person may need 15 days. That person may start preparing for the prelims 15 days prior, but you need to prepare at least, not prepare as in prepare for the prelims, prepare revision itself. So in, let's say if I have to give an example, ancient medieval art and culture and maps and environment based factual stuff, for example the national parks and the places where they are, the parts, the biosphere reserves, the rivers, the mountain ranges, the biodiversity hotspots and everything, all of these lists have to be remembered, and I did not used to remember them. So I understood this from sir's classes, that the only way out is speaking them up or at least reading them multiple times. And there is no way out. But the fact that I used to let it go because revising it was difficult made it important that revision becomes an important part of the preparation. So I found it difficult because I was not able to remember such factual stuff about what reservoir or what national park is there in which state, and I was finding it extremely difficult. What Santosh sir started doing is every day in the class he will ask someone to speak about it, at least in a geographical sequence from north to south or from east to west in a proper sequence. He started asking people to speak, and whatever numbers you could remember is fine, but there are two aspects to it. It also induced shame in you or fame in you. The fame that you remember it, or the shame that you do not remember it. The shame causes you to remember it further. So that is how he was ensuring that a person was revising for sure, and that was crucial as well. So last 7-8 days are very crucial for these subjects to be revised. As I mentioned, the map work, the ancient and medieval part, the art and culture, and the environment aspects. But let's say you go for things like polities conceptual parts, not polities factual parts. Again, polities factual parts would require you to, let's say, the constitutional body, the statutory bodies. You would require for sure revision just prior to the exam, again within the same 1 or 2 weeks of framework is what I would suggest. But let's say if you have to go for economy or ethics, or for that matter even to a great extent the history part, at least the timeline of the history, this is something that should have been in your head, and that should have formed in your head very organically, and it should be based on certain concepts and certain anchors in your head. These anchors will help you as heuristics. For example, you have one reference point, and with that reference point you generally study the whole syllabus, or at least recreate the whole framework. You remember about Shatavahanas, and you remember who is beyond them, who is after them, and you will start remembering few certain details. That is what makes sure that revision becomes technical for you, and revision becomes scientific for you. So in this case, as I mentioned, these subjects require you to study even before, and it is fine if you do not revise them very proximal to the exam, because they are not going to change over the night. It is not primarily driven on facts or details. It is primarily driven on logic and few analytical aspects, which if you have captured, then you will be in a very safe position, at least in case of the prelims, and even in case of mains as well. So then I'll say that there are other aspects to the exam, in terms of the timeline being one, and the other part being what is to be revised and how it is to be revised. So, as I mentioned, the factual aspects have to be revised, because if you don't, you will start fearing them, as I did. Even though I had cleared my second attempt, prelims in my second attempt, but I was still afraid of these lists. The primarily the lists being elephant reserve, tiger reserves, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, the biosphere reserves, biodiversity hotspots. Such lists exist in enormous amount throughout our preparation, and if we are not very well versed with revision as a process, we generally are afraid of these lists, and that costs us marks. And as you can see, this exam is becoming more and more unpredictable. I will not deny the fact that this year's prelims was much more difficult in terms of the exam, but it has again landed the cutoff to be very low compared to the last year. So so as we can see, we cannot take any risks in such case, and that is why we have to exhaustively finish at least those parts from where, even though the syllabus is huge, questions are for sure going to come. For example, international mapping, for example, the environment, for example, the species and the list of them. So these things need to be finished, and you cannot take risks on them because you cannot remember them. The only way out is revision, and how to revise it is very, very crucial. So let's say you have PYQ based very critical themes, or let's say you have very static questions and static facts. For example, every year there is some question on bonds and yields, or some question on the exchange rates. Now, these are very important aspects and important topics in terms of economy. A person needs to be very well versed with it, and revision has to be there for sure. And if you are actually done in terms of conceptual clarity, it is great, at least with the vis-a-vis questions like bonds and yields. But let's say you have to remember few details, for example, the recent repo rate, the recent SLRs, the recent budgetary outlays. Such parts need to be done very close to the exam. For example, the budget needs to be done very close to the exam, because in general, if you see PYQ based questions and themes as well, which are very repetitive, they will give you patterns as to what need to be done very close to the exam. then it is also important to understand that what is not to be revised and what is to be left. As many people are not able to adjust to those requirements, they end up feeling the extreme emotion called FOMO, fear of missing out on many details, and they end up becoming explorers of a lot of stuff. Even might end up having a PhD level understanding of certain thing, but they do not remember what is necessary for them to clear this exam, and that is where the issue is. So there are many parts which need not be revised, and that is very crucial as well. That is very discretionary as well, because you need to understand your requirements and your recall aspects, your ability to remember something and not remember something. For example, at this point as well, ancient and medieval has been so very well ingrained into my skin that I don't think I need to revise it that much. But it might not be appropriate for many people who are listening to this video, this session. So it depends upon you. So you need to understand what is not to be revised. It should not be the fact that there is a straight-jacketed format that Vishal Patnaik has mentioned that we need to revise this, and hence we are doing it, even though we remember all of them and we do not remember something else which might appear in the exam. So that is also crucial, and it is a very important aspect that you actually start testing them. So what I generally suggest, this is a technique that I have been utilizing specifically vis-a-vis polity in terms of revision, is I do not read it. I'll come to techniques as well, but this is something which has been very close to me. What I used to do is I used to study one chapter from, let's say, Lakshmikant. Then I'll go and solve one chapter's question, that exact chapter's questions only. So chapter wise format may be, you will find a lot of question booklets which are organized, which have chapter wise questions as per Lakshmikant itself. Let's say you finish the chapter of Parliament, and you go and finish all the questions about Parliament in that booklet, wherein chapter only Parliament is covered throughout those, let's say, 40, 50, 60 questions. By the end of that 60 questions, you will first of all have experienced around 70, 80 or 100 statements, or 200 statements for that matter, because of I will. So, because of that experience, you would have undergone through multiple statements, and this would help you understand how much you have actually retained vis-a-vis that chapter. That is the first part. The second thing that you do is, now you understand what are the solutions to that booklet or that chapter specifically. You read them and you realize that these are the lacunas that you had, or these are some parts of the book which you thought were just English or just written as fillers, but are actually sources of question. And that is where you are able to highlight and understand that, see that this aspect was lacking on my part, and the next chapter that I read should have similar analytical understanding on my part, and I should read it with that keenness. Now that will help you gradually develop the capacity to read something wherein revision becomes very pinpointed, because you require your own revision skills and necessities. So as I mentioned, what I used to do is first finish a chapter from Lakshmikant, do that chapter's question, then read the solutions of those chapters, again come back and read that same chapter. Once I've done this whole circle, I have plugged in all the gaps, because first there were gaps that I tested through that exam. Then the test gave me the gaps again. Those gaps were refilled by that chapter again. Now I have completed my one cycle. This one cycle will help me retain answers much more than only reading, or only doing the solutions, or only doing the questions. So mock tests are very crucial, but they have to be conjointly done in a scientific manner. And this is why I found polity becoming very easy for me, even though the questions had very difficult. So did you do this one? So yes, I generally used to do that one in the same day or the next day itself, so that I have some form of grasp on the information in on the same day itself. Otherwise, in 2 3 days, we'll again start. You will start lapsing on the facts and information. So it is crucial that you understand key these things can be done. Hence the revision is very crucial. Now, what all techniques can you generally utilize? One of them I have mentioned already, and that is something called as peer sessions. If you can find someone, I will suggest you very strongly that it is extremely crucial that you find someone who you can sit with over Google Meet or Zoom or whatever platform and read it out, read documents exhaustively and extensively. For example, let's say we used to pick up the very famous current affairs magazines close to the exam, and we would finish around 8 of those PDFs which used to come out in the last 10 days. We will sit throughout the day, 8 hours approximately, and we'll finish them off. And that was very helpful, and that helped us retain a lot of information, because prelims requires bombardment of information. It does not require extensive and elaborate retention per se, because there are few things which are not required for you to retain very for a very long time. It is required for you to have it on the superficial memory, which can be reproduced in the exam. And that is how revision through a peer session was very helpful. Again, the revision becomes very crucial, at least by the peer session, is when you have the interviews. Again, this is not relevant per se, I think, but for the interviews, again, the peer session based revision becomes an extremely crucial part, because that is the only way through which you can at least understand the speaking abilities and the ability to express oneself. Hence, that becomes an important part. So I used to do that through along with my friend, and that would compress the whole content into a very small period, and that is how bombardment of information is happening. And instead of going for, let's say, bigger groups which will spoil your preparation process, because again you will need a group management, you will have to appoint someone, it's proper a person, that person will be exhaustively putting an effort to gather everyone. Do not do that. Go for 1 2 3 maximum people, not beyond that, for revision at least, or for any discussion sessions. But do that very diligently, and it is very helpful. At least do that very close to the exam, because then you will be on your toes, and that will help you in terms of preparation. Now, the second thing that I would say is spaced rereading. Now, spaced rereading is very crucial. Now, rereading is very important, because you read something, then you again reread it. Sorry for the lisp. Actually, reread it. So one person can reread it anytime, any number of times as well. But then the important thing is ki now a person may not revise it immediately. Let's say I read something today. Now again I reread it. Now that thing is already in my head since I completed it 2 3 days back. If I again read it during these next 2 3 days, I might find that I have a very strong retention skill. Now, that is why phasing it out and spacing it is very important, because reading itself is fine, but for us, retention is more crucial than reading. So, first, what you need to do is, once you attend classes, you will make notes. Okay? Because that is the primary question that is coming up, ki how will you make notes and stuff. So, once you have made notes, because you have attended classes and you have done things regimentedly and diligently, you already have well prepared notes with you. Read them first, or read the standard books. But once you have read it, of course, the first reading will not be of the quality that you want it to be. But just to make you very happy, it should be very close to your classes. Because let's say last week's classes you are reading today, it is good, because you would have at least some form of retention from that class. And when you read it again today, after a week, you will have around 30% or 20% retention from that class itself, and you will build upon it. And this revision and this spacing is crucial. But this first reading again will not be very active, because you are not going, there's nothing at stake. That is the primary thing. Since there is nothing at stake, you will end up feeling that you have to finish it the same way as you have done your classes. But let's say you attach it with some writing, or you attach it with some mock test, you will start revising it not passively but actively. So one for full reading, second full reading, the second full reading you will find yourself very serious, and even on the third full reading and recall you will find that the weak points are something that are visible to you, that I am not able to remember exactly the sequence of kings, at least post the 1857 war, or I'm not able to remember these sequence of events at least during the pre-independence era, or the events that led to such and such meetings or such and such roundtable conference or anything. So these things are not something that you will find yourself doing it upon yourself. At least I did not do that, but I had to pay for it. So what you can do is you can do it on your own, or you can just make sure that you have some exam or some test attached with it, and that is how you can actually ensure that this revision becomes more scientific. What is very crucial is key, do not pressurize yourself to remember everything on the first or second reading. It is anyways going to come naturally. Please do not cry, please do not make yourself feel frustrated or weak during this journey that you could not retain whatever you have studied. These are because you have to remember and learn a lot of things. And if you start breaking yourself down at the fact that you cannot remember few details, then you will start feeling weak during this journey, and you cannot take that risk. So make please have it in your head that you will need two or three, at least three readings for you to retain more than 50% or 60%. So these three readings is something you have to give yourself time, and it has to be in a phased manner so that you have necessary understandings and necessary parallel concepts that feed into this preparation process. Okay. So, as I mentioned, the first one that I mentioned was the peer sessions. The second one that I mentioned was paced rereading. And the third one that I'll mention is that is one of my favorites is the Feynman drill. Now, the Feynman drill is not something that you will generally hear in the market. It is a very fancy name for something that you call as teaching, because there are many people who end up taking classes, evaluating papers, and teaching a group of people, because that helps them retain information and understand concepts even better than they do it actually. So what happens is, you might feel that if I explain a concept which is very easily understood by me to someone else, they'll have an advantage. Please do not get into such myopic concepts and myopic worldview that is going to make you a weak administrator tomorrow. Have a very global one, vision which is empowering and empowers you as well. It is better if you actually start making someone explain something. If you find someone with the same optional, or if you find someone who is newly starting to learn, please make sure that that person gets some or the other help from you. Let's say what I used to do is I used to because I said ancient medieval is very close to me right now. I used to hate history. I'm making it very clear. I used to hate history, and except for the fact that Nikhil sir's classes were extremely brilliant for me, and I started learning history and loving it to a great extent. So much so that I started recommending it to a lot of people. But that is not important. I have also I started discussing it and explaining it to many people as well. There are at least three of them who I have explained it, because of which the timeline in my head is very easy, and a timeline in my head is very properly organized because I have explained it to them multiple times. So that is Feynman's drill. If you explain a difficult thing to everyone else, it becomes easy for you as well. That is important. Even if that person who is learning from you may not remember, it is important for you to understand that you will be the one who will be benefiting out of it. It is better if you explain difficult stuff to others once you have understood it. So Feynman's drill becomes a very important aspect. Now, let's say at times you will find that you yourselves do not have the conceptual clarity vis-a-vis certain things, because that person may end up asking you certain doubts which would not have come to your head. That again is making it much more better for you, because you are clearing the doubts which are possible questions or probable answers that could be written by you in the exam as well. Hence it becomes important. So So let's say you start explaining someone judicial review, and in case of that you will start explaining what the fact that there are three judges cases as well, the fourth judge case is important, the njac's formation, how judicial review is crucial, what judicial review sources are, what are the articles that give judiciary that power. And once you actually have elaborated someone in a very consolidated manner, you understand something else, that your brain has started creating frameworks in its head. It understands that there should be an introduction, there should be a relevance of articles, there should be a gradual transition to the main body through a connecting sentence, there should be the body should be divided into multiple parts which are extremely elaborative of what judicial review is, what are the various facets of judicial review, how are the examples of judicial review presently, and what are the best ones, who are the most famous ones who are known, that are known to the public, and how judicial review has been reformative and how judicial review has been constructive, but what are the limitations of judicial review as well. Now, once you start discussing these things on a very it can be a soliloquy as well with regards to the person who is hearing, but what will happen is your brain starts uh, making frameworks and arranging them in a very structured manner so that the other person can understand better. So it starts reducing the pain that you have yourselves undergone, and you start empathizing with that candidate much more, because you make sure that organization is actually directly available to that candidate so that that person understands it very lucidly. If someone would have explained it to you that way, you might have actually understood it in the first go possibly, or even if someone else did, that is the exact reason why you want to explain it to someone else as well, because it was so easy and so clear. So Feynman's drill is a very important one. You can, so in my interviews as well, it was suggested that I put my phone camera and the audio recorder on and put it at the corner of the room and start speaking from the other corner, and listen to what I have spoken, the pitch, the tonality, the content, the construction, the organization of every answer that I give. So that was also suggested to me, and that is also Feynman's drill. So this is an important aspect wherein you teach, you find someone to do it, or you use audiovisual means to make sure you have done it properly. Now, similarly, a different approach to revision is brainstorming. Now, again, it might sound redundant, but brainstorming is very crucial because, let's say, specifically for so once you start writing answers, you will understand that brainstorming is something that will come naturally to you. But there are few parts of the exam, for example the essay. Now, essay you cannot write every day. You can write two answers every day, but you cannot write essays every day, right? And in such case, brainstorming is the only go-to solution that you have. You can at max write 10, 20 essays, but that is something that many toppers do not write as well. So, and you won't find that many essays being written by any topper, except I guess Vikram Grewal, who has I guess written around 15 or 10 essays, 10 plus essays. Now, there are very few people who would have written, at least written and evaluated these 10 essays. Hence, it is very crucial that you take up exercises like brainstorming with essay topics, because philosophical essays require your brain to churn and digest the topic, understand its essence, and reproduce the proper elements that are to be associated with it. Now, that requires your brain to be trained, and brainstorming is a training exercise. The brainstorming exercise that you do for essays can help you vis-a-vis your GS answers as well. You can do GS answers ka brainstorming, but GS answers itself have so less time that even if you do brainstorming, it is initially very helpful, but you can't do it in the exam hall. You can't take a brainstorming in the exam hall. You have to make sure your brainstorming becomes very fast vis-a-vis GS. So, but brainstorming still holds very strong relevance with regards to the essay paper, and that is where brainstorming becomes important. And that brainstorming also has to be done scientifically. Now, what do I mean by the word scientific? I mean that it has to be appropriate in terms of all the dimensions being covered. Now there are too many people who end up using that pastel framework for essays, and now evaluators have been bored of it. And you can find the fact that the marks are getting reduced and reduced to a great extent in the essay papers. The primary reason is most of them do not know how to have a very lucid writing and lucid flow of writing. the this the logical answer to it would be the fact that UPSC asks you to write 7 papers which are very regimented and very time based, and you have to make sure you finish those papers properly. But out of these 7 papers, 6 of them have proper time limits. If you do not abide by, you will find yourself in a very difficult situation. But essay is a very creative liberty wala area wherein you have been given very high creative liberty, and UPSC is challenging you ki see, I've given you a blank paper, I've given you all the creative liberty, I've opened up the stage for you. Show me all the juices that flow in your head and all the emotions that you can evoke through your writing without any form of limitations. So now that regimentation is not something that non-regimented writing is not something there in all the GS papers, and hence brainstorming becomes very crucial, and that exercise to do brainstorming becomes extremely important as well. So once you start doing, let's say, the brainstorming for essays, you will understand that many dimensions, the political, the pestle, beyond the pestle as well, there are too many dimensions, and those dimensions have to be written in a very logical as well as a very lucid format so that the flow and transition looks natural, instead of you going ki socially this is what has happened, politically this is what has happened, economically this. No, please do not go into such forms of way. The brainstorming helps you uh, take up ideas and reframe them in such a way that they are lucid. Hence, please take up this exercise, undertake at least before your mains or before your exams at least 10 to 15 essay brainstormings. I have done at least 30 essay brainstormings, and they have helped me a lot because that helps me collect a lot of examples. Now there was someone who had asked about chat GPT as well and their usage. What happens is, when let's say you have taken up an essay that you never enter the same river twice. Now in this case, you are, let's say, trying to find examples and stuff, and you're trying to remember these examples as well. uh, at times you might find yourself with limited number of examples. You use chat gpt to find dimensional examples. You don't put this whole topic itself and find examples, because chat gpt won't be giving you appropriate examples. But you, let's say, you interpret it in a very in a manner wherein history is linked, or in a manner wherein geography is linked. So geography is, let's say I take, you do not enter the same river twice, and I link geography with it, and I take up metamorphosis as the example, how a metamorphic rock is formed, how marble is formed per se, and I write it in a very lucid manner. That becomes a brilliant example for me to remember and to reproduce in the exam as well, if something of the similar kind or the theme of change comes up in the essays. Now that is how you use chat gpt. Again, I'll try to give you another example. See, so someone had already asked me about ChatGPT as an example, ChatGPT as a question, and I waited for this moment for ChatGPT to be used by me. This exercise of lucidly fitting in a requirement into your essay or into your writing, so that it does not look artificial, but it looks in sync with the flow, comes from brainstorming, an ability to understand what can be considered where. Now, that is how brainstorming helps you, and that is why I'll suggest that please take up dimensions. SMA add multiple more dimensions, but in case of GS, the same pastel dimensions and even for a few other frameworks are also there. They can be utilized. These dimensions are very crucial. So, this helps you in terms of making sure that your brain is adapted to answer questions which you may not even have prepared for, because you know how to structure them. Because dimensional brainstorming helps you out with another thing as well, that how you will expand that answer and fill up 2 pages or 3 pages. You have multiple dimensions. You know criticism is to be written, you know advantages is to be written, you know a case study is to be written, and you know for as a matter of fact, there are at least 4 5 points have to be written under 2 3 subheadings. So this is where brainstorming is going to help you out. Now, the other most important revision technique is something called as passive reinforcement, and that is something that I learned from my roommate as well, who was with me during my training at my state services. Both of us are presently assistant commissioners of GST in the state services. Now, while he was preparing, again like I mentioned, this doubt that has been asked is a brilliant example for what I'm going to say. Because this person used to also prepare with me, I could not clear my prelims because I mentioned that I did not do the revisions properly, as I had mentioned in the beginning of the session. The revisions that I had done for my second, third, and fifth attempt, I could not do them in the fourth attempt, and I did not clear. But this person has had different ways of revising. He ensured that he had podcasts, he had proper lessons and proper plans, which are there available with them in terms of audiovisual means always. Even during sleeping as well, I have found him listening to geography podcasts, listening to geography audiobooks on Kindle, and listening to various audio notes on geography as well. That is how he was able to revise a lot of aspects of human geography, which are anyways not regimented that much and are a difficult part of geography as per him. And he could actually finish a lot of it by such sessions, because we were working, we had limitations of time. A person who is not working has a lot of time, but a person who is working has to balance work with revision and studying both. And in such case, you employ all the audiovisual means that are there with you, so that you can actually enhance your revision and enhance your preparation. I saw him do this for the first time. The first thing I saw, that he started listening. He was listening to Harry Potter always while before sleeping, and I thought that that was the only thing that he used to do. But then I realized that he was also listening to audiobooks on geography, Kindles, podcasts, documentaries. Even at night, once I woke up at night, he was reading a book written in 1800s, and finding its geographical and finding the proper references of longitudes and latitudes mentioned in it vis-a-vis the present longitudes and latitudes, and finding the gap between the two to understand how cartography was done then, how cartography is being done now. Now, he got inspired to do this because he was listening to a podcast which mentioned that such exercises can be taken up. There are many historians who have mapped the world, and there are many historians who have mapped the longitudes and latitudes. Such longitudes and latitudes have a different reference point. They do not have Greenwich reference point, the 0 degree. They have different reference point. For you to understand various reference points and various important cities of the world, an important part would be to understand history's reference points in terms of mapping the world in itself, or finding the longitudes and latitudes. And that is something which has that was something which actually made me feel that there are multiple other ways through which preparation can be done if you are actually invested in something. I started listening to audiobooks on anthropology as well when I started later on, because there are many parts wherein Louis Leakey's videos, and even there are few audio notes on the same, and the sun and the discoveries were something that I started listening to. And by virtue of this listening, I understood the fact that actually anthropology was a biocultural study, and biology and culture has to go hand in hand in terms of anthropology and its preparation. And that is something that got ingrained in me very gradually through these speeches and through these voice notes that I used to listen to. The very important examples that you can take up as of now are the Rajya Sabha TV debates, or the erstwhile debates of any recorded cases. Even Nikhil sir has a history podcast that can very much be leveraged upon by you. Because I had attended one of the podcast sessions, and it was actually about Gana Sanghas and whether India is the mother of democracy. Now, this is a very important topic. Essay can also be considered on the same, whether India is the mother of democracy and what is the basis of democracy and the roots of democracy that India has seen in its history. So, such podcasts give you different understandings, different views. Now, these revisions may not be very much crucial, very proximal to the exam, but if you are away from the exam, they very much become the anchors through which you study your subjects. So, these revisions give you strong frameworks and points through the podcast and through these sessions. Ki these are important details. I have to have them in my head. Once I have them in my head, whatever else do I read about the same thing, I actually read vis-a-vis that reference point. So it is important that these passive reinforcements are also to be considered, because many times you feel fatigued, many a times you will not feel as if you are in a position to prepare very strongly or very actively at such points, at such low movement. It is better if you well for that. Because let's say in case of my interview as well, Palki Sharma was a very important person for my preparation, because her sessions were very important. Everything she used to say used to be asked the next day to some or the other person in the panel. So it was as if she was giving me cheat codes for the interview. Now, if I do not take it up and if I end up only reading, it is very much possible that those 60 plus year people may not be even reading themselves, because they also have audiovisual means to explore and understand. So it is, of course, always crucial to have a mix of all these techniques in your revision repertoire, so that your preparation becomes a scientific one and your preparation is conducive to you and not regimented by some institution, some organization, or some mentor. It is very critically customized as per your own requirement. These techniques are what you can actually rely upon. Now, most people do treat revision as something that they can do any point at any point in time. Even if you finish the syllabus thrice, if you have not revised, you are not going to do well in the exam. I can assure you of that. Finishing the exam thrice does not mean finishing the subject thrice does not mean you have revised, because every subject requires a different revision, as I have mentioned, different revision technique, different time frame of revision, different proximity to the exam in terms of revision, and different parts which need to be revised. So, silly doubt, I do have the tendency to write and learn while trying to read factual stuff when trying to memorize facts. Example, history or national park. Do you also practice? Yes, you can. Yes, you should actually. I used to also scribble a lot. Please, but do not make notes out of it, because again you will start making notes and notes ke fir se notes and notes ke fir se notes and multiple revision notes, and that will make it difficult. You do not have to be a notes collector again, बिकॉज डिस्ट्रिक्ट कलेक्टर बनना है तो नोट्स कलेक्टर नहीं बनना है. इसी वजह से यू हैव टू मेक श्योर दैट वॉट एवर यू रीड you have one source, and that source is to be repeated and revised. That is the fundamental of revision. I did not mention that one source and that consolidation is the prima facie work that you have to do before revision. If the consolidation is not done, then revision itself becomes a failure. Fine, you can add, of course you can add, or later on you find something great, and you can of course add, but revision fails if you do not add. And if you start making notes from different other notes of yourself, then nahi, that is not desirable. Okay. So what about answer writing in anthropology approach? My answer looks like GS answers. So so if you Dwij Goyal's answers, if you look at them, he has around 10 markers, maybe he has four subdivisions of the same answer. And so in that way you will so what I realized that I was not writing answers anthropology ka GS ke hisab se, and when I saw his answers I realized that he was writing it in terms of GS itself, but he was ensuring that technical content was there. But he was making sure that there was an introduction, he was making sure there was the body made, there was benefits, the case study, the critical appreciation, the positives, the negatives, the advantages, the disadvantages, the way forwards, everything was written by him. So he was making sure limitations are written, the way forwards are written, the case studies are written, the approaches taken by the government is written. Now he was ensuring that there are subdivisions to the answer, and this is something that you learn from GS, and this is not something that you learn from anthropology. Anthropology does not ask you to write such things. The traditional anthropology at least does not. But for us, it is very crucial that we look at every answer in a very technical and analytical manner. In that sense, it is helpful if you write in terms of GSK subdivisions, but the content has to be enriched as per the uh, subject, and for that you need understanding of the subject. Digestion of that subject itself is difficult. Anthro may seem very hunky-dory to the people outside the anthro world, but it is not hunky-dory anymore. At least it is a elaborate, very exhaustive subject, which is having its syllabus added every year too, because of people who from medicine, people from biotechnology also taking up anthropology and adding their own understandings into their notes. So anthropology is becoming difficult in that sense. And for anthropology also, revision has to be done again in a very scientific manner. When I say scientific manner, it needs to be understood. Let's say you are doing fossils, or let's say sites, make sure all the geographical areas are covered: north, south, east, west, northeast. All five of them are covered, so that you have examples from each of them. Even if you have one or two examples from each of them, you will be able to write a good answer. But if you do not have one, and let's say they end up asking you ki east mein se you give me a paleolithic, lower paleolithic site, you will not be able to answer, and your answer will become very generic, because many aspects of the answer will be same as any other site. But if you do not know the name of the site, it is going to be difficult. So make sure your revision has all the aspects to it. Also, if you do not have your own notes per se, apart from Karandeep sir's notes, if you want to refer to any other topper's notes, let's say I refer to Apala Mr. Ma'am's notes, and it was nice. It helped me score around 50-60 marks more than last attempt as well. And of course, source guidance was extremely crucial in that. So you can take them up, but revision यहाँ पे यही करना है. Techniques तो सब बता दिया. Though those techniques have to be utilized in case of optional as well. But again, the requirement of the subject के हिसाब से उसको manage करिए. How to revise from Karandeep sir's anthropology note? It's very bulky. You will realize that Sir himself will pinpoint upon revisions and the necessary parts of revision when he undertakes the crash course and the case study and the test series. So that part is something that is the exact reason why I attended that as well, even after being a foundation course student, because that helps you ration off between what is crucial and what is not crucial. And that I'll tell you something, that Sir's test series and Sir's last crash course was so important for me that it gave me around 10 questions in paper 1 and around 10 questions in paper 2 directly. डायरेक्टली बोल रहा हूं मैं ये, ठीक है. So that many number of questions were there directly. So and through these test series and crash course classes, he had ensured that you know what is crucial for you. Whatever you have studied and whatever you have understood is fine, but when revisions have to be done, these are the very specifics that have for sure to be revised by you, that are for sure to be revised by you. And that is something that he had ensured through his classes, through his test series as well. So as of now, for this point, at this point, go through chapter wise revisions and write tests. Sectionals, again, the same thing that I did for that you do for prelims. Do chapter wise and sectional tests, and if you can do that, after some time you will have hold on the subject. Even if you, let's say, forget multiple crucial details, you will know the gist, and you will have certain examples which will be sufficient for you to score marks. So that is important. That comes with gradual revision and writing concurrently happening, not just revision, not just writing, both of them happening. So fine. uh, I guess I have addressed all the doubts that are there, that were there with in the chat box. Just let me check it first. Sure. So we can wrap up